Greetings, 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 everyone. Good people. Welcome to day 25 of our 28-day ancestral activation for Black liberation. All this week, we have been working with community ancestors who have done their part to leave us a framework so that we can restore ourselves, so that we can heal from the many centuries of oppression, enslavement, and really work towards our liberation, but so that we can heal from what we've experienced, in both the trauma from the past and the ongoing trauma that, quite frankly, we are experiencing today. And these ancestors we're working with today and honoring today, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Queen Mother Moore, and we give them thanks. And the work that they've done has been around the idea of uh, political liberation, and we'll dive into their lives and what offerings and wisdom that they have for us. But this entire ancestral activation has been about tapping into ancestral wisdom so that we can get a frame of reference on how to move forward, both individually and collectively. If that's something you're interested in, definitely like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you know when we go live. We only have 2 more days left after this of this activation, but trust and believe there is more to come. It won't be every day because that's a lot. But Black History Month required and really called for us to dig in deep and bring forth the wisdom from as many ancestors as we could during these 28 days. I am Barbara Ohuninifa. I am an author, a coach, a speaker, and I work with Black women specifically to help us remember that we are beautiful, remember that we are powerful, and to be love, and to literally saturate ourselves with love. And in order to do that, there's a lot we have to clear out. There's a lot of false beliefs, negative beliefs, toxic beliefs that we have to clear out, that we have been fed, given, and inundated with our entire lives. And for generations, this has been the case for Black women. And so that's the work that I do. If you're interested and want to know more about my one-on-one coaching programs or even my books, check out all of the links in my description for this video and all the videos. And let's see how we can move forward. I would love to assist because we are in times where we need everybody on deck. We need everybody healed or healing. We need community. We need connection. So that's what I'm about. So let's move forward today. And let me just, if you're new here, to make it through these 28 days, to go through and be consistent and show up while managing my chronic health conditions and my energy level, there are days when I'm not on camera, and this is one of those days. Pretty much every other day. I might not be on camera tomorrow either, just to make sure that I have the energy and the reserves for our final day, Friday, February 28th, the last day of Blackity Black History Month. But I thank you for your grace in not seeing my beautiful face today, but you will hear my voice and you will see the slides. And we're here and we're sharing information and we're honoring these ancestors. That is the most important part. So again, thank you for that. And just want to give you that one piece of housekeeping. And then the other piece is that quite often, in most scenarios, I've been doing a meditation, a guided meditation, after we understand and claim the wisdom from the ancestors. Sometimes this week in particular, I haven't done that because there's been some other guidance that I've received in terms of what's necessary for people to do. Today is similar to that in that we're going to go deep, and these are two very powerful liberation ancestors that we're going to tap into, that we're going to understand. And there's a lot to process with that. I may come back at some other point and do more, a deeper and even deeper session on these two, but we won't be doing a meditation today because we're going to take our time with the content because there's so much that we can learn from that. And, and we're still living in much of what they've done. I mean, we're living in everything all the ancestors that we've talked about have done. So enough with the housekeeping. Let's get into it. So Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, as well as Queen Mother Moore. Let's get into their foundations. What did they experience in their early lives? What really drove them to understand who they were, their work that they were here to do, and to actually follow through on that and have the courage to follow through on that. So Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he was born in September in Nkroful, and I may not be, it's a whole other language, so that may not be how you say it, but I'm rolling with what I see. But the point is, he was born in 1909 in the Gold Coast, which was then known as the Gold Coast, but now is known as Ghana under British colonial rule, hence the name Gold Coast, because the African people, the many different tribes that were in that area did not call themselves the Gold Coast. British colonizers saw fields upon fields of gold. All they saw was cha-ching, and they named the entire region the Gold Coast. This literally was its name for many years until Ghana won its liberation, which we'll get into that because Kwame Nkrumah was instrumental in that. So he was the only child of a goldsmith. That was his father, his first name was Kofi, and his mother was a retail trader, Elizabeth. So a goldsmith and a retail trader. So he came from a certain esteem, we'll say. And he grew up surrounded by African cultural traditions, and they really instilled in him this appreciation for who he was, for his own African values. And he also witnessed the realities of being exploited by the colonizers. And this initially sparked his interest in liberation. You could imagine with all of the mining and all of the conflicts and all of the things that they being the British, did in order to extract as much as they could. And he saw that. Just a moment. I spent a lot of talking for a lot of days in a row, y'all. The voice is like, what we doing? Okay. So his journey in terms of his education, in the earlier part of his education, because his education is long, he was attended a Catholic mission school, and he excelled academically and was introduced to Christian teachings. And he progressed on to Achimota College in Accra, which is renowned for blending Western education with African cultural studies. So this enabled him to understand the West, but also to understand himself. Aside from having grown up in an African household and been there, he actually learned about the history and the culture of his own history and culture, and that helped him to have pride in his African heritage. And he was awakened to this whole global political experience through his education, his international education. He, in 1935, he went to the United States and he enrolled in Lincoln University. So he received his BA in sociology, and then later he went to the University of Pennsylvania, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Education, as well as his Master's of Science in Education and his Master's of Arts in Philosophy. So his understanding, his intellectual and academic understanding of people, how people worked, how we thought, deep intellectual thought around philosophical ideas. Like, he was truly an intellectual and a student of humanity. He also enrolled in doctoral studies at both of those universities, but he didn't complete the PhD program, either PhD program. Instead, he ended up leaving for London, and he really got immersed in the liberation movements that were happening there. But before he left, he became the president of African Students Association of America and Canada. So this is where, his leadership started to emerge, combined with his academic background and understanding, combined with his developing viewpoint on liberation, because he was immersed in the works of W.E.B. Du Bois um, and Marcus Garvey and this whole concept of Pan-Africanism. But he kept moving forward. So again, he went to London. He was invited there by one of the activists. If I can find it in my notes, I will say it. but he actually moved to London, and he was invited there to play a role in the Fifth Pan-African Congress. And that was an event that united African leaders in a call for decolonization and African unity. And that was where he collaborated with different influential leaders from Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, and others that really strengthened his vision for this idea of continental liberation, meaning all of the countries in Africa being liberated from colonial rule after being divided up by European forces, Britain, France, Belgium, so on and so forth. So being a part of this Pan-African Congress enabled him to connect with others and to learn and to grow. And so instead of continuing to pursue his academic route of going towards his PhD, he decided it was time to let go of intellectual pursuits and actually put boots on the ground, to do the thing, to actually work real time in liberation. So after the Congress, after the Pan-African Congress, he stayed in Britain and he continued to work with African nationalist activists and writing political essays and refining his ideas on socialism and African unity. He also worked as an editor for the African Interpreter. He was involved. He took all of that education, all of that background, all of that understanding, and applied it to actually doing the work. So while intellectual piece was important, he continued on to actually do the work real time. And we give thanks for the work that he did. Eventually and we'll talk more about that. He did end up going back to, not end up, but it was the next part of his journey when he returned to Gold Coast, again, now Ghana, after being invited by the United Gold Coast Convention. And this was a political party, and he was to serve as their general secretary. But eventually he broke from them because they had a very moderate, gradual approach to liberation. And his whole stance, which eventually became the model for the political organization that he created, was self-government now. There was no gradual, um, incremental concessions that he was looking for. We needed to. His point was that we needed freedom now. We needed to get the British out now. We needed to govern ourselves, and the only way we can learn how to do that is to do it. So he broke from the UGCC and created his own. And again, we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But that's his background, that's his foundation, understanding that rich intellectual foundation that he had, as well as with his own family, and the fact that he was educated in the West, came to the United States, so he understood that mind. He understood what he was working with and dealing with when he dealt with the colonizers. But he also had that foundation of the education that he received at home back in Ghana, or Gold Coast, whichever version of that we want to claim. We're going to just say Ghana because, they didn't name themselves Gold Coast. And that foundational experience, you can see how all of that fed into the work that he did. Brilliant person, brilliant man. And so let's talk about Queen Mother Moore and the work that she has done for us. She was born Audley Moore on July 27th, 1898 in New Iberia, Louisiana. In the South, baby, during post-Reconstruction racial terror. Her parents died when she was young. It was difficult to find, and it may not even be accurate because our records here in the United States, if you go far enough back, are just, I mean, hell, even now. But her mother died in childbirth, again when she was about 9 years old, and her father died shortly after that. Unclear exactly how he died, but given the time periods, I'm sure there's a reason why it's unclear because it was undocumented because it was something not above bar. So that means at the age of 9, she and her at least 2 younger siblings were orphaned. And what did she do? Like most little girls at that age, which is inconceivable to me, she dropped out of school and went to work to take care of herself and her little siblings. She did domestic labor. She washed clothes for white families. She cooked, she cleaned. She served as a nanny and a caregiver. All of these are the kind of jobs that little Black girls had to do in that era because it provided the bare minimum income that they needed for survival, the only thing that they could do. Now, over a few years, by the time she was 15, she was trained and making a living as a hairdresser. But all the time, she kept reading. She kept educating herself. She read newspapers, pamphlets, anything that was available to her. She even went to regularly visited church libraries because that was among the very few places that Black children could go to get reading materials. And she read, she read, she read, and she taught herself. She studied works by Frederick Douglass. She eventually was influenced by Marcus Garvey when she attended one of his speeches. She read about Sojourner Truth. She read about Harriet Tubman. She radicalized herself just by reading about all of these incredible Black people that had come before her. And she understood the impact of systemic economic oppression because she was living it. All of this fueled the work that she was to do for us. And as I mentioned, in 1919, she attended a speech by Marcus Garvey in New Orleans, and that just really solidified her commitment to fighting for our people. The message of Black pride and economics independence and the idea of returning to Africa, it resonated deeply with her. It was a defining moment for her to embrace Garveyism, and Pan-Africanism, and that shaped her activism. She moved to Harlem in 1922, and she joined Garvey's organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and participated in the first international convention for the organization. She even invested in the Black Star Line, which was the effort to establish Black economic independence by Marcus Garvey. So she was all in. Again, relocating and dedicating her life to this fight. And as a part of that, what she, through all of this and the preparation and the education that she was giving herself and getting from others, she ended up preparing and submitting reparations petitions to the UN. And in it, she championed women's rights and economic justice. She formed organizations. She did a lot of grassroots organizing, which again, we'll talk about as we go forward in the next slides. But ultimately, she was honored as, in 1972, she was honored as Queen Mother by the Ashanti people when she went to Ghana to attend Kwame Nkrumah's funeral. So yes, he passed in 1972 at the age of 62. So and she went to his funeral, and that's where they crowned her with that title. So they worked in different circles, more or less, but they were still connected. I think that was just a beautiful way to kind of tie all the things together. I'm sure they knew each other at some points, but they were doing, different sides of the same fight. So we give thanks. And as we move forward, and let's talk about what did they do? I mean, clearly they did a lot. Again, we could just have a workshop on each of them and go in deep. But I'm trying to summarize and go talk because we don't have hours to put in today. So Dr. Nkrumah. Now let me be clear. He did not actually earn his PhD. As I said, he said, the time for academic and intellectual thought is time to shift into action. So he left the PhD program that he was in to go to London and start doing the work. But in his lifetime, because he did so much for decolonization, for Pan-Africanism, several universities across the world gave him honorary doctorates. So he is known as Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and we put respect on his name because he earned it. He got his PhD in real life. So we give thanks. Um, so his work included this Pan-African vision. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the wisdom. Having a vision is so critical. He developed this vision over time and he held to it. But what was beautiful is that he also had the skills intellectually and in terms of being able to collaborate and to understand, he had the skills to create a strategy to fulfill that vision. That was key. That is a gift for us to see that happen and actually play out and end in the liberation of a country. So his experience in that fifth Pan-African Congress, it really solidified his belief in African unity and that it was essential for liberation. He advocated for political unification of Africa, and he coined the phrase, Africa must unite. And he had this vision of this part he, was not able to materialize, but he had this vision of United States of Africa, basically of all of the African countries coming together under one shared economies and political structures so that they could have strength versus the colonizers. And he believed that the only way to defeat colonization colonialism is through continental solidarity and not these isolated national independence movements. He wanted all Africans to come together, all African nations to come together, to have that vision and to have the strength to pursue that vision and the strategy to try to pursue that vision was phenomenal. And we give thanks to him for that. And as I mentioned, when he went back to Ghana, he was invited back by one organization that was pretty moderate and a gradual way of looking at their at liberation, the universal. I'm not even going to try to go back to remember what the name of it was. But he ended up breaking away from them and claiming and creating his own organization, or a different organization, I'll say, the Convention People's Party, CPP. So you'll see it referred to as that. And that really, how he approached that, the strategies underneath that, was really revolutionary in that it mobilized people. It mobilized people towards independence. And as we said, his model was self-government now. Clear, simple. There was no way you could try to infer something different from it. It was very clear. And it wasn't a gradual thing, it was now. And in this organization, he pioneered this use of something called positive action, which we'll dive into again because it's critical landscape and blueprint for us to look at now. It was a campaign of strikes, boycotts, mass civil disobedience, all against British colonial rule. And it was very grassroots mobilization, and included everyone, workers, farmers, youth, women. His belief was that we needed mass participation in order to affect political change, and he achieved that. And we can look to that as guidance. And he led with Ghana becoming independent, that was the first sub-Saharan African nation to get free, to remove colonial influence. Now, it was an interesting diplomatic process. There were, some confrontations and lives lost, but it wasn't through war. It wasn't through armed conflict. And March 6, 1957 is when the Gold Coast became Ghana, the first sub-Saharan African nation. And Nkrumah, it took about a year. He had a different title at first, but was named as prime minister. And he's noted for having said in his inaugural speech, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa." So even though his country had gotten liberation, had achieved liberation, he still was going for the continent. He still was going for decolonization globally. He still had that vision and held it. And even in the midst of where he could just be celebrating his own victory or the victory for his own country, he still was looking broader, was looking bigger. This man had vision. And again, he advocated, that was the whole point. He advocated for the liberation and decolonization of Africa. He hosted an All African Peoples Conference in 1958 in Accra, gathering leaders from across the continent so they could discuss liberation strategies and how to resist imperialism. It was that conference that really cemented Ghana's role as the place, the beacon, the light for Pan-African thought. It was the launching pad for liberation movements throughout Africa. So in order to get to, I want to just talk a little bit about how that road to independence, because it just seems really nebulous to me. So I dived into it a little bit more. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. So when he created the Convention People's Party and they were doing what they called positive action, the boycotts, mass civil disobedience, strikes, all of the things to impact Britain's money and to make sure that their colonial system of governing could not work. Because the only way it could work is if people agreed to let it work and to actually participate in it. So he and other leaders were grassroots, groundswell, getting people to, let's say, strike, transportation, key industries where it would make things halt. And because of that, they imprisoned him, of course. They said he was, inciting issues. And they were thinking that by doing that, it was going to deter people, but it did not. They were ready for that. It made them even more galvanized that they needed independence now. And because of that pressure, they decided to hold elections. Now, when they held elections, their assumption was that that more moderate, we're just going to take things slow and easy party would win. They miscalculated. The people won. The CPP won. Nkrumah's party won. And because of that, they had to release him. It was a landslide victory. He won the majority in the Legislative Assembly. And then following his release, so this was the other title he had before Prime Minister. It was Leader of Government Business. Was okay. So he became the Prime Minister. And then through series and years of negotiation and political struggle, they got full independence in 1957. So even though technically 1951, 1952 is when they won the election and they should have been fully self-governed, in order for it to not be a military conflict, he used all of his skills to fully get Britain out and to gain their full independence. So March 6, 1957 is when Gold Coast became Ghana. Unfortunately, 9 years later, while he was traveling to Korea and to North Vietnam and China, not Korea, he was traveling there while he was away from home, there was a coup and his government was overthrown by another organization called the National Liberation Council. Now, that coup was executed by local military and police officers, meaning blackety black people. But as we all know, they didn't do that on their own. There is clear evidence that suggests, we just going to, if you see me, I've had quotes, earmarks, air quotes, that the CIA was involved. The United States and Britain was like, no. They probably were plotting that and trying to figure that out the whole 9 years that Ghana and that he was in charge. So as a part of that, he lost his government lost control, and he was exiled in Guinea, where Sekou Touré, and we give thanks because this Guinea housed a lot of our liberation fighters from the U.S., from South Africa. Like he did a thing. So Nkrumah went there in exile, and President Touré named Nkrumah his honorary co-president, acknowledging who he was, acknowledging his stature and the work that he had done for the people. Now, ultimately, as I mentioned, he died in 1972 at the age of 62. He was in Romania at the time, and he died from prostate cancer. That can be another message for Black men in terms of taking care of ourselves and, well, not ourselves because I'm not a Black man, but I mean in general, Black people taking care of themselves and ourselves in general. But that's another thing that impacts Black men at a astronomical, a high rate. Y'all know when I get tired, my words just start doing their own thing, and that's what's happening today. So I just want to kind of take a little bit of a detour there and explain how things happened so that we can be prepared for them and understand that even in the midst of fighting for liberation, even in the midst of doing something that benefits us all, we still can have people who look like us who not with us. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. And that's what he experienced. And I'm sure that had to have hurt so deeply. You doing all of this for your people, and your own people allow themselves to be used to betray you and themselves. Ultimately, that's something we can learn from that. So let me go on to Queen Mother, now that I've done my soapbox a little bit. Queen Mother Moore. So she framed reparations as a global human rights issue. She was badass. She was one of the earliest leaders that demanded reparations at an international level. And in that demand, it included land rights, monetary restitution, and cultural restitution for descendants of enslaved Africans. It was, and it was two different petitions, one in 1957 and then one in 1959 as formal petitions. And in it, asking to acknowledge historical injustices, slavery, Jim Crow, the exploitations, and understanding and mentioning and talking about in those petitions the need for psychological healing. So this wasn't just about money, even though that's a part of it because we built this economy, but also about the psychological and cultural restoration that was needed. And that's what we're talking about today, this whole week, is the restoration on many levels. And in some cases, restoration means political action. And that's what she championed in terms of the reparations and bringing it to the global stage. And she also championed Black women leadership. I keep telling y'all, I don't be looking for it. I know I'm always going to be for and down for Black women, but everything that our history is telling us is about the importance of Black women. It's about the importance of us being here, of us being involved. So she founded the Universal Association of Ethiopian Women, which wasn't about Ethiopian women. It was connected into Black liberation movements at the time that really looked at Ethiopia as a benchmark for what that could mean. But the organization was about advancing matriarchal leadership. And we mentioned she was a key figure in Marcus Garvey's organization. But overall, she just believed that women's leadership was central to African liberation. And she challenged patriarchal structures. Now, um, part of how she looked at that, and part of how she looked at, part of what she was honored for was women's leadership and that idea of matriarchal leadership. That was part of the reason why they gave her that name. Oh, wait. How do you itemize and define cultural restitution? That is a very interesting approach to try to understand. And that was part of what's in there, what's in her proposal. And what was under that particular area of the proposal was to give, some of it came down to funding to allow research to be done so people can trace their roots. Think about how we have all of this ancestry.com now and DNA things that we can do. What if all of that was available to us and we had genealogists that were available to us specifically trained in our lineages, in our cultures, to help us trace back our lineages and our bloodlines, to help us connect in with who or the families that we are a part of. So, back at that time, we didn't have that. So it didn't use that particular language, but it did use language around cultural education and connecting and having resources that would help people connect with their lineages and bloodlines. Okay, let's move forward. And then she advocated for economic and educational empowerment. She led community-based campaigns around political education, cultural pride, economic independence, and she encouraged Black folks to start businesses, schools, and health centers. Again, it's not that much different than what we saw in Black Shields, I'm sorry, Black Shields, in Sacred Shields in week 2, creating everything that we need within our own communities. And that was part of what she was advocating for then. The idea is to have self-sufficiency, to have Black communities that could take care of ourselves, where we had cooperative businesses, schools, all free from white control, right? Absolutely. And then she talked about, oh, keep it moving, strengthening global Pan-African connections. I mean, this is the area where her work and Dr. Nkrumah's work overlaps. I could imagine what it was like in that time period when there was so much Pan-Africanism, so many leaders. I mean, it was dangerous, but there seems like there was a community of people that was expanding globally that supported each other. Again, not all skin folk was kinfolks, but if you knew who, you knew who. So that's where they kind of connected again, doing, and it was significant her receiving that title from the Ashanti people, because that is a title, it's a spiritual title. It is not one that they just hand out like other monarchies in Europe. It meant something. It signified her role as a leader that bridged the gap between the continent and the diaspora. It really linked the traditional African political structures to the diaspora. It made her reparations advocacy and Pan-African activism and her cultural legacy, it kind of legitimized all of it so that people could understand the key connections. So just like I deep dived a little bit on Dr. Nkrumah's The Path to Liberation for um, Ghana, let's talk a little bit more about her petitions, because, and understand this in the framework as I go through kind of these key points and parts of her petition. This woman dropped out of school in 4th grade to take care of herself and her siblings, 9 years old. So she'd been working and teaching herself her damn near entire life. I don't know if you can even count the first 9 years. You could just say her whole life. To go as far as she is drafting petitions and presenting them to the UN on behalf of her people. She knew what she was here for, and we give thanks. So, key features of her petition: it had a legal framework. Her petition was grounded in international law, specifically referencing the UN Declaration of Human Rights and anti-colonial principles. She asserted that African Americans were a colonized population that deserved reparations. It included monetary compensation. She demanded financial compensation for centuries of unpaid labor. Can I just take a side note? I saw, if you go on Don Lemon's YouTube, he posted a short that basically was him responding to a video of someone else interviewing or talking to, I don't even know who the white man is. I probably should know who he was. But this man is basically laying out very clearly why he voted for Trump and what it all means. And it's not, you know how earlier in this week we talked about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and her point of view, her research that showed in her book ISIS Papers that the whole issue of racism is the non-melanated people's subconscious fear of annihilation. And that is exactly what he said. I mean, not those words, but that's what he said. That's what he's doing. If we can get rid of all the immigrants and, you know, all the Asians, all the Latin people, because eventually if we don't get rid of them, white people won't have a place. Our way of life won't exist anymore. That's the whole, this is what we're up against right now. So it ain't even subconscious. They know it and they're acting on it. They too, unfortunately, have the strategy to implement what they believe in. And, published it and nobody believed it, but here we are in the midst of it being implemented. So I went off on a tangent. Oh, yeah. So what he said in that was, my ancestors built this country and they didn't intend for it to be taken over by others. And the man interviewing him, who was an Asian man, he was like, do you really believe that? Well, who else built it? It was his response. Black people, Asian people, because they came and built the railroads. He was just naming people. And, it cut off because Don Lemon went on. But this dude was about to say, you don't think we could have done that? But you didn't. It's just crazy, the delusion that they have. It is definitely something deeply psychological. And I think revisiting Dr. Cress Welsing's work, as well as Dr. Ani's work, and understanding the psychological fracture. It didn't happen. I don't know when it happened. It happened so long ago that it's just part of who they are and their cultural way of looking at life. And, what do you do with that? We got to really understand what we're dealing with so that we can create strategies to truly, fully deal with that. That might be the one component. Dr. Nkrumah understood uh, people, humanity, but he may not have had a really good enough, clear understanding of the psychology of what he was dealing with, of the people that he was dealing with, because that work hadn't been done yet. Okay, back to the to the petition. Yeah, we're gonna have to go back to that. So back to the petition. Okay, so yeah, it was the part about the unpaid labor that just sent me off. All right, I'm back. And also, not only the unpaid labor during slavery, but also the ongoing social economic impacts of racism. It still is impacting us today. We can see from all the damn budget that they just approved, it's not specific to Black people, but they know and everybody knows it's going to impact us, but it also is going to impact others, including some of them fools that voted for this. Moving along, land and self-determination was part of what the petitions included. She wanted land grants. It suggested that reparations should include land allocations for African Americans who wanted to self-rule. Now, this is where she's bringing her Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement and integrating those concepts into the petitions. And this is where the cultural reparations, that psychological and cultural repair was needed or is needed for us to reclaim our African heritage. And so things like educational initiatives that can help reconnect them with their ancestral roots, them being us. So it was more than money. She was looking, as a mother would, at all the different aspects of what it would take to make us, the children, all of us, the children, whole. She looked at it in that way, and that was what part of what made it different. And one thing I will say, I won't go through all of this because I went in. This petition that she co-authored, it was titled, "We Charge Genocide: The Crime of Government Against the Negro People." I'm going to say that again so you to understand the heaviness, the weight of that. This Black woman did not play. We charge genocide, the crime of government against the Negro people. And then the second petition, that was the first one. She came hard on the first one. The second one with a petition was titled Petition to the United Nations for Reparations for the Descendants of Slaves. That combination of the two, she did not come to play whatsoever. Again, remember what she came from, 9 years old on her own. And in addition to that, when we think about that whole strengthening the global Pan-African connections and the organizing that she did, she traveled extensively across the United States, particularly the South, holding community forums. She went for real grassroots. She did the Chitlin Circuit. She participated in labor strikes, and she helped educate Black folks about what their rights actually were. Because just like what they're doing now and trying to take all of the anyone who's going to dissent, anyone who's going to say anything different, anyone who's going to share actual real information, those are being taken off of mainstream media. It never was in mainstream media back then, so the grassroots route is where she had to go, and that's where we got to go now. But we'll talk about that as we get into the recommendations of things. And she, again, as a matriarch would, she focused on education. Not only education, but it was clear that that was a piece of it. And specifically educating Black women. We've been saying this, as a mother or a Black woman is educated, so too are her children. And she built coalitions. She worked with others. She worked with Malcolm X. She worked with Paul Robeson. And one thing, again, that draws from our culture as an African people and drawed on her position as a matriarch. And it actually just even hit me, the fact that she had to leave school to take care of herself and her children. This woman had been a matriarch since she was 9. She was serving in this role since she was 9. She came here with it. But one of the things that she did and how she did it in her organizing was oral tradition and storytelling. She communicated history. She communicated the clarity and education on what people needed to know and how they needed to move and what their rights actually were. She used the power of her voice, door to door, small groups, churches, community organizations, all the things. So these were some powerful, this combination of what the two of them did. Again, moving in different circles, because Nkrumah was more, it was Pan-African, which included what was happening here in the United States and other places, but he was more global. And Queen Mother, hers was also Pan-African and took our message, this reparations, call for reparations, to the global stage, but it was in reference to us here in the United States. But their work intersected, and it just continues to echo what we've been hearing these last few weeks, in that our path to liberation is multidimensional, it's multifaceted. It has to include economic sovereignty. It has to include political sovereignty. And then there's a lot more things in between. Cultural reclamation, it has to include that as well. All right, so let's keep it going. Y'all see, I'm hyped on this one. Well, I'm hyped on all of them. And then, so let's talk about what the wisdom that they left for us. I mean, we've already talked about it, but we're going to go a little bit further. So Dr. Nkrumah was like, Nkrumah was more around that's unified political and economic power, and this idea that, I'll just go into his 2 quotes that I thought were really interesting. I couldn't even just pick one. I mean, there were so many. But let's talk about this first one. And this is the wisdom. We'll talk about how to actually implement it. But if we were to, from my analysis, encapsulate his wisdom in something that we can move forward, there's 2 points. Freedom is not something that one people can bestow on another as a gift. They claim it as their own, and none can keep it from them. And it basically means that freedom must be seized by the oppressed, not granted by the oppressor. The reason why Britain, they held the elections and they thought that other party was going to win, so that there would be gradual transition, that within that gradual transition, everything would still be set up in a way that benefited the British, that their economic interests, which is all they cared about, would be satisfied in that system. That is not the freedom that Nkrumah was going for. It can't be granted. We have to take it. So we can think further about what that means for us. And then revolutions are brought by men. Now you can replace men with human beings. This is 1950s now, so this is just language that was available at the time. So revolutions are brought about by humans by Revolutions are brought about by humans who think as humans of action and act as humans of thought. So essentially, that means that change requires people who can blend deep thinking with decisive action, and that is exactly what he did. He was such an intellectual thinker. He had such an understanding. Again, he had a master's of art in philosophy and a master's of science in education. And then his bachelor's degree was in sociology. So this man could think very deeply about systems and how things work together and how people work together and how culture worked. And then he took it to the people, he took it to the streets. He actually um, implemented things, and it wasn't all theoretical. So we wanted to summarize what we can do. It's going to be empower our communities, and that liberation must come from within. And what does that mean for us? So with his organization, the CPP, their deep grassroots network is what enabled them to have this broad-based participation. It's what enabled them to win in a landslide. It was what enabled the country to free themselves. Mass participation, inclusive participation, and decentralized leadership. So when he was arrested and other leaders were arrested, it did not stop what was happening. It did not stop the organizing. It didn't halt the movement, which is what the British thought it would do. Leadership was decentralized. Everyone was involved: youth, women, workers, intellectuals. Everyone had a role to play. And again, that horizontal leadership structure, it prevented things from collapsing. So we have to, as we move forward, think about how do we get everyone involved. Now, again, all skinfolk and kinfolk, so we need to be clear and we need to be careful, but even doing that strategically without excluding people. There's a lot of us at very high levels of socioeconomic status. There are those who are extremely educated, and then there are those who are not either of those things, who are just day to day just trying to make it. We got to bring everybody together somehow, some way. All the groups, all the aspects of us come together so that whatever the thing is, whatever our version of a positive action campaign is, we move forward together. Now, I'm talking about this from the perspective of Black people. There is a larger movement that also needs to happen and is slowly starting to happen as people wake up. But Black women are a little bit tired of that because so much has been on our backs and no one listens to Black women, or has not in the past anyway. So as we've been saying all year, the 92% are sitting back going to brunch. Y'all get out there and do the marching. Y'all get out there and do the thing. But the reality is eventually, bit by bit, in whatever way we individually can, we are going to have to get into the fight because this is also for our children and our great grandchildren. And I'm not telling, there was somebody or another chick on social media talking about we need to get over it. I mean, this was a Black woman talking about we need to get over it because this is affecting everybody. You can't tell a Black woman, even if you are a Black woman, when they need to get over something. Especially because she was like, I don't know, she might have been in her 20s, maybe 30s. Sis, you ain't been doing this long enough to tell nobody jack. It's been people that's been in this fight their entire lives. If they want to say pause, I'm sick of this shit for a minute, they can do that, while also acknowledging that this whole thing is crumbling and we all got to do our part in it, but we ain't got to do it right now. Or we don't have to do it the way others say we need to do it. We don't need the white men who are waking up, and then the ones who didn't vote in that direction, the white women. I'm going to start with those two in particular. And then we got the Latino, the Asian, and the Black folk, everybody else. But white men and white women and all of the gradients of genders in between, since what's happening now on a broader scale, and this is this is me talking. What's happening on a broader scale is in an effort to save your quote unquote race, because race is a construct. we're going to need y'all to step in and do some things first, or massively. I won't say first because maybe we do things all at the same time, but we're going to need y'all to show up. Mass participation, inclusive, decentralized leadership. That'll also help with not everybody knowing all the things that are happening, so that if somebody want to snitch. Another piece going around social media is some old heads that were protesters, and their whole message is, if you get arrested, shut the fuck up. If you get detained, shut the fuck up. Like, that's the whole that's the whole post, is giving advice on what to do, but at the end of it, of each advice on what to do, it's shut the fuck up. Don't say nothing. Don't give up nothing. Okay, let's keep it moving. And then strategically use technology with some clear messaging. Like, his message and the message of the organization was self-government now. You can't misconstrue that. You can't change that. You can't, there was no mistake what it meant and what they were going for. There was no convoluted politician talk in it. The worst thing in the world is hearing a politician talk. They say a bunch of stuff and didn't say a damn thing. This was clear. This was action oriented. 3 words, period, dot. Nobody can forget that. Words that are clear and simple and cut across class, cut across ethnic divides, cut across educational levels, something that can be understood by the people. And using what we have now, which is technology. We can use digital tools, and there are many, more than, the metas and that thing that used to be Twitter. There are digital tools that can be used for organizing, to counter propaganda, to get and gather international solidarity. We can strategically use the messaging with the technology, and the technology with the messaging. And all of that means words, images, sounds, and sequence of experience. Now, that's the marketer in me talking. That's what my, and the mass media arts, that's all of that is like. You got to put the whole message together to understand. And yes, messaging to the masses is critical for success. Even though he was lying, that's part of how that fool got in office. Saying whatever messaging was going to work for the votes that they was trying to get. Although, again, we got some technology masterminds. So whether he actually got all the votes that would have actually had him win, to me, is questionable. But the messaging piece, it has to be clear and consistent. And then we're going to go forward. This idea of the and you can see everything is strategic. We're just not reactionary to anything. We're being strategic about how we resist. So sustained nonviolent resistance. And each of those words is important. One, strategic. What actually are we trying to accomplish? And what are the steps, the components of the work that we will do to accomplish that end goal? That end goal. What are the things we're trying to do? And sustained, it cannot be a one-time thing. It cannot be, yes, on February 28th, in just a couple of days, if you're watching this live or today, February 28th is a national blackout, economic blackout. Don't spend nothing online, in person, nowhere. If you need to go to the store, go before, the day before, go the day after. And in general, spend as little as damn possible right now. Slow this shit down. That was a key component of that strategy, of their strategy. They slowed down, which is the next point, is this coordinated economic disruption. They refused to buy anything British. Now, mind you, in their world, in their environment, all of their natural resources, just like the rest of the continent, is being extracted. And then finished goods and services brought in, not services, but finished goods brought in from outside at higher cost. So the British are extracting natural resources at such a low cost, disrupting the natural environment, disrupting the lives of the people, and then selling British products back to the people at a regular old price. And part of the positive action campaign was to stop buying British goods. And like I said, the strikes. So things weren't moving, industry wasn't moving. So how we can think about that is, we haven't talked about strikes because these fools are so busy firing everybody. So I don't think that that's come up. Pull out the beans and the rice. Child, listen, that's where we at. If you wasn't nobody vegan, they about to be vegan now. Can't afford no $15 eggs. But this economic disruption, which is a part of sustained nonviolent resistance, but it's worth bringing it out and separately because that is at its core. As now there was an announcement yesterday, I don't even announce whatever. Anyway, this idea of a gold card instead of a green card, a gold card. So this dude is just selling U.S. citizenship to oligarchs from other countries. I mean, it's so blatant and clear. It's just incredible. And I don't mean that in a positive way to hear. So how can we make it so unprofitable to want to come here and continue to exploit people or to ramp up exploitation? Because that's what it all is. Oh, you can come here and they can come here and start businesses and do all these things and employ people. No, they can come here and oppress people and rape and pillage the land. Anyway, coordinated economic disruption. So if we want to strike, doing that in a coordinated way to put pressure on certain industries. I thought I heard something about pilots striking, and then I did not. I didn't look into it to see if that was actually a thing. Dr. Belizaire, if you're aware, let us know. But if I were a pilot, if I worked in the airlines whatsoever, I definitely would. The way those planes are happening. I mean, since the dude took office, what has it been? 12 issues? That's unprecedented. Since he fired everybody in the FAA. So key industries could go on strike. This is part of what was helpful and worked in Ghana. And we can look at promoting, and we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, Black-owned businesses, cooperatives, investments. What was the movie? New Jack City? We all we got. It's real times now. So when we look at these four ways of navigating, these four ways that we can implement, let me tell you, I tried to boil it down as much as I could because there's so much we can learn from the work that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah did, the work that he did not only for his people in Ghana, for the continent of Africa, but for all of us. There's so much we can learn from that blueprint, from that model. We can take that model, break it down, apply it to modern times with all of the resources and tools that we have now, update it based on what we know, based on some of the models from like a Dr. Welslings or a Dr. Ani and more, to really come up with our own Project 2026 not in response, sort of in response, but that goes above and beyond that, truly mapping out a future for our descendants. There's so much we can unpack there. We could come back and do another session on this work, on his work, on Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's work. But for now, I'm gonna keep it moving and talk about Mama Queen, Mother Moore, which we know her vibe was all on the reparations, reclaiming our culture, and by virtue of who she was, but also she spoke on it, the idea of women's leadership, critical. So two of her quotes, well, actually, these aren't exact quotes. It's summaries from things that she has said over time or things that she has written, but it summarizes her point of view. It summarizes um, and our words or phrases that have been associated with her. So Dr. Nkrumah was exact quotes for Queen Mother Moore, not exact quotes. And so we have to tell the truth about the crimes that have been committed against us. Reparations is not a handout, it is justice. Fire. We got to tell the truth about these crimes because these fools are lying to us and themselves. They literally are trying to rewrite history. We got to tell the truth constantly. You can't hide from it. We can't say, oh, we just want a colorblind society. We ain't there yet. So for now, we need to keep alive and remember what was done because they were horrendous crimes against humanity, what was done to us, what is being done. We cannot run from that, hide from that, or pretend it's not happening or didn't happen. Buckle up, Buttercup. Put on your big girl and your big boy and your big non-binary draws. Put on your big draws because we need to really be able to face the truth of what's happened to us because it's still happening to us and we're still dealing with the aftermath in terms of trauma in our bodies, psychologically. That's why this whole week, the restoration is multifaceted. We have to restore and heal our minds, our bodies, our political systems and structures, because that will help us to win back and bring back our dignity as well. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's approach was not only about the political liberation, it also included the cultural liberation. For him, the entire process and everything that he was doing was about reclaiming ourselves, economically, politically, culturally, all of it. So Queen Mother Moore is saying we got to tell the truth and to understand demanding reparations, especially how she laid it out, because money was only a component of it. Yeah, stop trying to sanitize history. It was brutal. It was horrible. Humans have been doing horrible things to each other, but European, specifically European men, and we're going to say women too, because they were right there next to them. They were getting abused and oppressed to some extent, not nearly the extent of all the other Black and brown people on the planet. They benefited from white supremacy. All of them have been doing horrible things to people to gain wealth that they still hold. So we got to tell the truth. Queen Mother Moore has said it, and the reparations is just a fraction of what should be done, and holistic reparations of what should be done so that justice can be done. But the thing is, the atrocity and the crimes are still happening and about to ramp up. And the other thing she said was, you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. Now, there's another part of something that she stood for to me that I attached to this phrase about hating the roots. You can't hate Black women and not hate yourself. We know a Black woman birthed humanity. The first woman on the planet was a Black woman. We are descendants of that woman who birthed humanity. So how can you hate Black women and not hate yourself? For damn sure, if your mama or your grandmama or somebody in your more immediate lineage is a Black woman, because we know there's a lot of Black men and women who hate Black women. And I said that. I said what I said. We know white women hate Black women but want to be Black women. We know white men hate Black women but they want to possess Black women. And all of it is because Black woman is the mother of humanity. How you going to hate the roots of from which you come and not also hate yourself. That's part of the issue. That's part of the psychological issue that we're seeing play out, I think. And again, evidenced by some of the other ancestors that we talked about earlier this week in their psychology work. And there's more we're going to talk about tomorrow in terms of decolonizing the mind and the deep psychological work, study, research that has been done on this topic. So we got to really connect in with our own cultural pride, connect to our own African heritage, and look at this Pan-Africanism as a part of who we are right now. That does not exclude the ancestors, the culture that we have here in the diaspora, wherever we are in the diaspora. In this case, I'm talking about myself in the United States. My people from Mississippi, the ones that I know, but doing a little bit of the ancestry work, I see we actually was in South Carolina. We migrated Virginia. We was in Louisiana. All of this is from either running away from plantations being sold, the plantation owners themselves moving. We had no control over all those things. So when I look at the the survival of our ancestors, these last 400 years in this country, 500 years in other places in the diaspora, like Brazil, we can't overlook them. We got to look at the whole thing and reclaim all of it. Reclaim all of it. But that does not mean, as Black people, we get to look at someone else and say, you ain't Black enough. Unless they voted for Trump, and then, then all bets are off. We could say that. So those two pieces, those quotes from her, as you can tell, like for me, it was just, I mean, for both of these two powerful ancestors, and I hope they chilling in heaven, sipping on some tea or a Guinness stout, talking about we got to send them some help, and I hope they send it. And Jesus right behind them, like, yeah, I've been trying to tell all of them. I hope I'm not being blasphemy, but in my mind, that's how spirit and all of these energies work for me. They just having conversations and trying to help us out, but we ain't listening. All right, let me keep it moving. I already went on off a deep end. Um, let me get back to this. Clicking the wrong things. Okay. And so when we think about how do we apply that today? How do we apply it now? And it's really we could summarize it in reconnecting with ancestral homelands and centering Black womanhood and activism. Now, there's a reason, even though she talked deeply about reparations, and that was a part of her leadership, I'm not necessarily saying that that's something we can apply right now because we are in crisis mode. We just trying to survive at this point. Talking about reparations may not be the most realistic thing to talk about right now, but we can strategically think about it as a long game and embed it into the things that we have to do in order to survive now so that we know when it's time to go come back to that, all of what we've been through, including in recent times, can be a part of that argument and a part of that petition or a part of that claiming because who we going to petition? We don't even know what's going to be left after all of this. But a bigger foundation underneath that, and the reason why I say reconnect with ancestral homelands, and that includes, again, the South in the United States or wherever in the diaspora you're from. I learned this from one of my spiritual teachers who would talk about, we always want to go and talk about reparations, but how can we as a people actually achieve reparations if we as a people are not even acknowledging the ancestors who worked, who died, who toiled? If we can't even call their names, if we can't even acknowledge them, if we don't even do the work to try to know what their names were, to tell their stories, to keep their spirits alive, to keep their name alive, to keep their legacy alive, if we as their descendants can't even give them that honor, that veneration, who are we to claim the benefits of what they lived and died doing? Now that's a conversation for us. Ain't nobody invited to the picnic. This ain't got nothing to do with white people and making that judgment call. This is between us. This is family talk. If we want to our ancestors' energies, whatever your spiritual system is, to support this idea of reparations, hell, to support us right now in surviving, that's the whole point of this ancestral activation. We need them. We need all the super friends. all of the we need everybody. I'm about to get into trying to name stuff. We need everybody. And when it comes to reparations, the first step for us, in addition to all the work Queen Mother Mary, why I keep wanting to call her Mary? Interesting. Queen Mother Moore has done is that we in 2025, we got to honor our ancestors. Not only again for the reparations, but to hold on to the Voting Rights Act, to hold on to the Civil Rights Act, to hold on to the freedoms that we have now, to hold on to our lives. So that's why I mentioned that. All right. So what are the things that we can do aside from what I just said? This idea of survival justice. Reparations is not a handout, it is justice. And we know reparation may not be as close to where we are of where we'd want to be. We may have been closer to that a little bit ago. It may not appear that we're close to it right now. We don't actually know what God, what spirit has in mind for us, what the ancestors has in mind for us, what's lined up. But we do have to participate in it. So things that we can do in terms of survival justice while we're building those foundations is mutual aid networks. We can organize community-based support systems that can provide food, shelter, healthcare, legal aid, beans and rice. We can support and establish Black-owned businesses and cooperatives so we can build the economic resilience. Go back to week 2, Sacred Shields. We had ancestors that broke down every part of how we could actually do that because they've done it already. Things got destroyed, but they did it already. I'm always, I can almost, I really feel that Black Wall Street may have gotten partially destroyed and would have still gotten attacked because jealousy is a real thing, right? But the idea that armed self-defense, Robert F. Williams, that was day 1 of Sacred Resistance, is a strategy somewhere in there as well. It's part of the strategy, I'll say. When Dr. Nkrumah was out of the country doing work to support his country, military coup. So while we have to think multifaceted and multidimensional, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. And oh, and then the other piece in terms of survival justice is protecting our rights. So we see all of these states, all of these nonprofit organizations, all of these coalitions are filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Now the question is the administration even going to adhere to whatever the judge says? It might be a little lawless, but we have to follow through and try to protect those rights. If nothing else, and for the record, after the smoke clears, because it can't keep going the way it's going. Again, we're going to have our Project 2026 and beyond plan, but we need to have these things in place. So continuing to engage in policy battles, legal battles at all levels. Now, centering Black healing and reclaiming our culture, healing is resistance and healing is restoration. Our cultural education and reconnecting with that African history, like we were just talking about today, and knowing the background of Ghana, and even the name Ghana being the name of an ancient kingdom, not far from where the actual country of Ghana is now, but there's a reason why they named it that, because that kingdom was known for its prosperity and its well-being for its people. And that was the energy they wanted to bring into their new liberated entity. So that's why they named it Ghana. We need to know, not necessarily that particular fact, but the idea of understanding and knowing history so we can make those connections, our culture, our spirituality. Mama Moore saw it as crucial for our psychological liberation to reclaim those parts of ourselves that were stripped away, that were fractured, that were ripped away when we were taken from the continent. And in doing so, we'll have that cultural pride. Same thing Nkrumah talked about is the cultural pride, so that we can have the resolve, have the reserves, have the resilience for long-term struggles. And when I say long-term struggles, it doesn't mean every part of life and every day is a struggle. But we know we're on a path. We know we have work to do that is not necessarily going to be realized in one lifetime, just like our ancestors. So you have to have something that gives you that fuel to keep going. And it's a little bit of joy, a little bit of cultural connection, because our cultural connection is joyful. Our spirituality is joyful. Everything about us, but we can get to business too. And then the other thing we can do is healing circles. We know we are going through trauma right now, and we already were traumatized. The trauma is on top of trauma, on trauma, on trauma. So we can come together in healing circles and healing spaces to support each other, to work through these things so that, there is definitely a piece of this, a large piece of this that is actual formal therapy. Go to see a therapist. Try to get a culturally informed therapist. I mean, it's really is paramount to get a culturally informed therapist. If that's not accessible, or in addition to that, community-based healing circles and spaces that use different modalities, different techniques to support community healing. Techniques that are more rooted in our indigenous culture. And then we can look at building power, grassroots. That's where we are now. I think, what was it, Rachel Maddow spoke to that on Joy Reid's last broadcast on MSNBC. It's the grassroots. It's mobilizing from the bottom up. We see, and again, there's astrology happening that's making things a little bit slow. And I think there's more that we don't know, that we can't see yet, that's making things slow. But the Democrats are all hemming and hawing. Well, I won't say all, because I'm blanking on her last name, but y'all gonna know who I'm talking about. Miss Jasmine, she's speaking. She's doing the thing. So I won't say all Democrats. Maxine, Mama Maxine, she's speaking. She's doing the thing. So I won't say all Democrats, but as a whole, as a political party, what are y'all doing? They letting us know by their behavior, whether it's intentional or not, it's about the people. It's about us mobilizing in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our churches, in our spiritual groups, in our women's groups, in our youth groups. It's about the bottom up. And I don't mean bottom in some hierarchy, a European hierarchy. I just mean the masses of people and mobilizing. So community-led political education, where we focused on political literacy, for people to know what a constitution is versus what an amendment is versus what an act is. I'm not even saying I know all the answers to those, but I know where to go find them, Dr. Belizaire. I know where to find, yes, Jasmine Crockett. I know where to go find the answers, but political education is key. Empowerment comes from knowledge, and education means that when we prepare our demands later, we do so from an informed point of view. Dr. Nkrumah was hella educated. You best believe, as he was negotiating for those years, couple of years in between him winning the election and becoming the prime minister, and when Ghana was finally declared an independent country, you best believe he was using every bit of intellectual prowess he had, negotiating with these British, and know that they was probably trying to run all kinds of game, but they couldn't because this man was brilliant. So educating ourselves and having the knowledge and having demands and documents. Even if we go back to last week with Toussaint Louverture, as they fought for freedom in the Haitian Revolution, he was ready with a constitution. it made him like ruler forever, but there was other components of it that made a lot of sense. He was ready. He was educated. He knew what to do and what to incorporate into those demands, into the system, into establishing some order, establishing a country. And then we can look at youth development leadership. Intergenerational leadership was important to both of these leaders, both of these ancestors. They invested in young organizers. Let me be real. I'm 50 plus. Uh, I'm probably not gonna be out on no physical protest. Ain't no probably I will not be. But some college students, absolutely. Some older high school students, absolutely. You have the physical energy for it, and that was how that effort in Ghana was so sustained and so impactful because everybody had a position to play. The youth, they were out there constantly. They had the energy for that. Those were a little bit older. They were creating the strategies. They were doing the writing. They were doing the more of the organizing pieces of it. So the point is, mobilize everybody, bring everybody together, and everybody has a role. And when we can do that and connect it in with these broader social movements, we can really we can show up in a way that can impact change. But what's the word that's missing on the slide that I'm gonna say now is unity. Unity. And I don't know if I have an answer for that other than to pray for it, be aware of it, and understand what it means individually for us. And think about, man, am I really showing up? Am I being in unity or am I being individualistic? Man, I had to ask myself that a lot. We got to this place because people don't understand how government works and schools real talk, stop requiring civics. And even when they did have it, like for real, it wasn't taught very well, at least not in my Chicago public schools. Probably intentionally, so it wouldn't make sense and it wouldn't be interesting. I mean, that's the whole education system. The older citizens help the younger ones. Wisdom helps strength. Yes. So they even know what to do and how to do it. And I will be a prayer warrior, like a what? Putting on some golden shields on people. But we got to actually have a coordinated strategy and some decentralized leadership. And that's the other thing. Everybody want to be the HNIC. I'm not going to say what that means. If you know, you know. But these are things we can heal and we can get through and we can tap into because we're here now. We have to. And then the other piece is to protect and assert our rights locally. That goes back to those legal actions. That goes to human rights councils. And that goes to documenting the harm that is being done in real time. Again, mainstream media is a wash. Nothing that is true will be documented going forward. It's going to be up to the grassroots, the independent media to document it. Individual people. Think about George Floyd and all of the other people who have lost their lives or been abused or been assaulted by police. If it weren't for camera phones and regular everyday people capturing these things on video, how many people, how many abuses would have gone free? I mean, shit, they already did. But at least we know about it. We got to capture what's being done real time. We are in crisis moment and there are going to be even more systemic failures and it has to be documented. This is not a time to pretend like shit ain't going on. Take care of yourself. Pause, pull out of the media or scrolling or whatever it is to take care of your own mental health, but it can't be permanent and you can't self-medicate. Staying a little high or a little drunk probably seem like a move right now, but it is not. All the shit will still be there when you sober up. I'm not saying you can't have a little sip, or a little puff if it's legal where you at, but that cannot be the way that you manage and just try to wait this out, because there is no waiting it out. But the point is, document harm in real time and really um, continue to put this legal pressure. And most of us as individuals, we're not filing lawsuits, but we can try to get involved to see what we can do. Oh, I can just fill out this thing and it'll send an email and a text message to my representative. Done. Or I can show up at a meeting, even show up at a town hall meeting like that woman that got dragged out of hers. I don't know if it was Iowa or Idaho. I don't know why I get the eyes mixed up. We can learn from Bishop William Seymour, cross-cultural and intergenerational unity to achieve common goals. Yes. And in that, because I got to mention it, we ain't centering white women tears, but if you want to come and do some work, I'm ready. Let's do it. I got two sisters and I call them sisters, and they just happen to be white, as Amanda, what is her name? She has a YouTube channel. Anyway, y'all know who I'm talking about. She said she had two really good friends who just happened to be white. Not that they were white and live in that whiteness. Anyway, I got two of those would be ride or die for anything that's going on. And that is a great example of how we need to work together. But it cannot be performative. It cannot be um, white women showing up as white women still trying to center themselves. They got to do their own internal work. And then when they've done that, then they can join the party and we can do this thing. But yes, that's this. It has to be at this point because everybody's under siege, unless you're a millionaire, a billionaire, or a white Christian billionaire man. Even the poor ones are under siege, but they just don't realize it. All right, keep it moving. Was that the last one? Oh, and so when we look at and I combine, because again, they were working. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Queen Mother Moore were working not together, but in a broader sense, together. All of these activists were working towards a common goal of liberation and decolonization. And this is our turn in this fight because it's not over. Clearly, these fools have got a resurgence. They got somebody in office now. They got a whole crew. They got a whole plan they've been working on, and probably been working on that plan for 100 years, bit by bit by bit. But if we can summarize what these two ancestors can teach us or have taught us, take a deep breath. We have to sustain our hope. Everything from day one, January 20th, has been to dismantle hope. And the reality is, hope is a strategy. It's either a part of a broader strategy or it's one of the components and it's a strategy in and of itself. Either way, we cannot abandon hope. But how do we do that? Political and cultural education. Both of these leaders, both of these ancestors spoke to that. They emphasize education and cultural renaissance, reclaiming it. In Ghana, Nkrumah enacted educational reform so that individuals could know their heritage and they could foster self-worth and resilience. We have to educate. And as Dr. Belisaire said earlier, is that we're in the position, we got to this place because people don't understand how government works. And we stopped teaching it. So we have to teach it. We got to know what we're actually in. So when we see these words, when we see these things, we know what it means, or at least have a place where we can go find out. And then there's strategic visioning. I could only imagine what kind of meetings, what kind of retreat sessions and planning sessions they had to create that multi-100-page document that they're working through and implementing right now. We have to come together in some way to have some strategic visioning, whether it's in I guess as I'm talking, it's coming through. Individual community dialogues and strategy sessions. And there's lots of people who are trained and understand how to do this. We just got to do it on a broad scale. Visioning exercises so that individuals within the communities themselves, the communities adding up to cities adding up to states. I mean, to get the visions of where we can go and where we want to go, creating that future, creating that 2026 and beyond future starts with a vision. That's what these two ancestors had. They had a vision, and they also had the wherewithal and the intellectual capacity and capability to develop strategies to fulfill that vision. Now, the question for us is, do we have a vision? Can we create a vision so that that can be a thing that we hold on to for hope? That is what leaders do. They create a North Star. They create a vision for the future, whatever it is, even if it's just a damn project at work. A true leader is going to create a vision for where we're trying to go and help the team to create strategies by keeping everybody focused on that vision. Now, in our case, we got to have decentralized strategy, which means our vision has to be even stronger. So, visioning and workshops to get there, grassroots, because it has to come bottom up, is going to be important for us to sustain hope and to sustain this fight, to actually seek and achieve liberation. Oh, 900 pages. There's a link that I shared on Facebook of it in digital format showing the check marks and the progress as they work through it. It's detailed and we're seeing it play out. But it's not too late. It's not too late for us. And I'm going to just have some level of hope that somewhere there are some brilliant minds that are doing work that's just covert that I don't know about. And that's fine too. Tap me in when you need me, coach. So the other component of this is, and again, they both had visions and they kept the visions alive. And the other component is the storytelling, using art. We talked about that yesterday with Miriam Makeba, art as resistance. We have this digital world now. We have all of this technology. We have everything at our fingertips to create storytelling campaigns. Listen, in the marketing and advertising world that I came from, they've been talking about storytelling for decades. It's at the core of every campaign, every Coca-Cola campaign, everything that you see, everything that creates consumerism is based on this concept of storytelling. Propaganda is based on this concept of storytelling. We can storytell as well, but we can storytell the truth, and we can use what is uniquely us because we are some creative, trend-setting people. We create culture and we move culture forward. Our storytelling, using all of the technologies and the digital communications and all the things that we have available to us now, can be so incredibly impactful and can help increase and sustain hope. We can tell our historical stories. We can tell the stories of the future. We can even create visuals, actual video, real looking visuals of what our future could look like so that it can give people context and to maintain and sustain hope. We have to use all the things that are available to us now. This is a time that artists get to work. Artists of all forms, performance art, visual art, literary arts, all of it. Music, all of it. I said performance, all of it is my point. Document our history, our struggles, the current times, the contributions, the future, Afrofuturism. All of these things can help sustain us. We cannot give up hope. That is what they want. We cannot. Take a deep breath. Still wind up being almost, well, we're not quite at 2 hours because I'm wrapping it up. A lot of folks have a vision but no clue of implementation. That is exactly right. That's why I'm like, put me in. Let me listen. I'm gonna get into the astrology of the situation. You want to figure out how to implement something to bring it down to earth and actually create a system, get you a Capricorn. Or at least somebody that got some strong Capricorn energy. Yes, I'm looking at the astrology in it because that's important. It's real. And I'm saying that as a damn Capricorn. That's why I was good at my job. You give me an idea, a concept, a thing we're trying to get to, I can break that shit down and figure out how we're gonna get there. Now I'm not saying I need to be the one to do it, but it's that energy. It's that it's a special way of looking at things on how we break this down. And it's literally how do I bring something that's in my head or in someone's head or that's a vision and bring it down to earth and make it real. That's a process and a way of thinking. Some of it can be taught, and a lot of times it don't even necessarily have to be taught. It's just a way that people do. But it's what's necessary. That's why we need everybody on deck and we need everybody with a role to play. So we can get it done and move it forward and get after this liberation. Okay, let's take some deep breaths as we close out. Again, we're not doing the meditation today because we got nation building. We got things to go and think about and strategize and take notes on. And I'm gonna stop before I get into a whole other presentation. So let's take some deep breaths. In through your nose. That was an out through your mouth. You want to do that again? We're going to inhale clarity and confidence and release confusion. When you inhale through your nose, when you exhale, it's through your mouth. Let's do that together. Inhale to the count of 4. Let's do it again. We're inhaling clarity, confidence, community, all the good C words. And we're going to inhale to 4 counts. Then you're going to hold for 4 counts. And then you're going to exhale through your mouth for 6. Inhale. Please feel free to continue that on your own. With every exhale, just release. Let Mama Earth have it. Let whatever tension that's in your body, let the shoulders drop with every exhale. With every inhale, allow clarity to come in. Allow just fresh oxygen to come in, to rejuvenate you, to replenish you, to bring you forward. And go look into Nkrumah. He has a document that he wrote that talks about neocolonialism. That's on the interwebs. You can go and find Mama Queen Mother Moore's UN petitions just to read their words for yourself and let them sink in. That's your meditation. To understand the minds of these brilliant ancestors that left these blueprints for us. And let that inspire you to understand what your role is, what inspired action you can take, how you can contribute to this. Thank you, Dr. Belazir. As always, we appreciate your wisdom and knowledge as well. And we will see y'all tomorrow Day 27, we almost there. And until then, as always, take good care of you.